Shalom and welcome back to Israel with Aline. Today, in our Easter special, we will go through the last 24 hours of Jesus' life together, following step by step the path he took. With the cenacle, the place of the Last Supper, Gethsemane, the place of the betrayal kiss, the imprisonment at Caiaphas' house, the place of judgment, the Via Dolorosa, Golgotha, and ending the day at Jesus' empty tomb. Strong emotions await us today. So if you are ready, let's begin. The last 24 hours of Jesus' life begin here on Mount Zion with the Last Supper on Thursday right after sunset, because that is the tradition of the Jewish Passover. And at this time of year, sunset is around 6:30 in the evening. So our clock starts on Thursday at 6:30 in the evening in the cenacle, also known as the upper room. The Bible tells us that the Last Supper takes place on the second floor of a house. The Bible doesn't mention the name of the owner of the house, but the most important tradition in Jerusalem says that it is this place. So now let's go up together to the upper room and learn more about the first moments of the last 24 hours. Here the Last Supper of Jesus took place, but before starting this great meal, Jesus does something that shocks his disciples. He washes the apostles' feet. The washing of feet was a common practice in biblical times, which the master of the house offered to his guests. However, it was not he himself who did it, but rather he offered a servant in his place. And that's why Jesus' act shocked the disciples so much, because he did it himself. And the meal itself, it will start around 7 in the evening at 1900 hours. They gather here then around a table and sit in a reclining manner in what we call a triclinium. And this meal will be extremely important. During it, Jesus will predict who is going to betray him. He will also predict Pedro's denial. And since he knew everything that was going to happen in the next 24 hours, he takes the unleavened bread and the wine and gives them to them. And then he teaches him about the bread and the wine. And it's also interesting because this meal was marked by unleavened bread, wine, and also by the Passover lamb that was eaten and by the bitter herbs. And we can really see Jesus' bitterness intensifying hour by hour throughout this day. The Jewish Passover meal is long. It takes many hours, both nowadays and back then. So they start around 7 in the evening and they will be here for several hours. They finish the meal around 11 at night or even at 11:30, and then they head to their next destination. And after this great meal, this very important biblical moment, Jesus gathers his disciples, and he is going to take a walk crossing the Kidron Valley towards the Garden of Gethsemane. He arrives with his 11 apostles, all of them except Judas. He leaves 8 of the apostles here outside, and only with Peter, James, and John does he go in, where we are also going to enter now. Gethsemane, or in the original Hebrew, Gachmanim, means the place of the olive press. And it makes perfect sense. Look where we are. Here, both today and in biblical times, there was a lot of olive agriculture, and olives were pressed here to extract pure olive oil, which could even be used for anointing in the Temple of Jerusalem. And something that I think is really beautiful and important is that this place has been preserved as a garden, so well preserved that here there are a few trees like this one that are original from biblical times, trees that are still living and even bearing fruit. But Jesus doesn't come here to appreciate the beauty of the garden. He arrives here during the early morning hours. So imagine this place completely dark, with only a few torches or lamps to light it. And Jesus begins to feel anguish, and he says the following, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Keep watch? Who died? Jesus. He knows that the betrayal is going to happen very soon. He knows what will happen in the next few hours. And that's why he already starts to grieve and invites the disciples to grieve with him. And Jesus then decides to separate himself from the three apostles who were here, and he moves away to a stone. And there he goes into agony, into a deep suffering, so deep that he even sweats blood. And now, together, let's walk to the place where this happened. Look how incredible. This tree is also from biblical times. And in the background, we can see the Golden Gate, where we made a special video inside it last Sunday. I'll leave it linked up here in case you want to watch it, but now we're going to see the Stone of Agony. Can you see that this church is dark? This dim light reminds us exactly of the darkness in the garden when Jesus was here. And he withdrew from them about a stone's throw away and knelt down and prayed, saying, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." And an angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. And the stone on which Jesus had his agony has been preserved to this day, and we see it here. It is a witness to these events. The church was originally built in the Byzantine period and was destroyed and rebuilt several times. The last reconstruction took place in the 20th century with the support of Christians from all over the world, including Brazil. That's why, in honor and gratitude to the Brazilian people, the coat of arms of the Republic of Brazil was placed here on the church ceiling. Jesus is really going to be in great agony, and he returns to the garden and finds the apostles sleeping. He wakes them up and goes back to pray. This will happen 3 times, and on the 3rd time he comes here and finds the apostles sleeping. He knows the moment is coming. Then Judas Iscariot also approaches him with a crowd and many soldiers and gives Jesus the kiss of betrayal. And then they arrest Jesus and are going to take him from here to the house of Caiaphas, where we will also go now during this dark night. This church was built over the remains of the house of Caiaphas, and it is called the Church of Peter in the crowing of the rooster. Because look at what is drawn here. We see this great meal, and Jesus tells them, one of you will betray me. And Peter says, I love you, Master. I will never betray you. And Jesus' answer will be, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And here we see Peter surprised by what Jesus says, but what he predicts at the Last Supper will come true here where this church stands today. The original part, the archaeological part, is located a few floors below. So, come with me, because what we came here to do is follow in the footsteps of Jesus. And we want to see the original stones where everything happened. The level we were on is the level of today. Going down a little, we find the Byzantine period, which is the first Christian period of the Holy Land. And among the many things from that time that were found is a beautiful mosaic floor. And we can see a small part of it preserved here on the wall. But to find things from the time of Jesus, we have to go even lower. Jesus is brought here during the early morning hours, when most of Jerusalem was sleeping, and they had no idea what was happening inside here. This is the prison where Jesus was placed. This place was full of soldiers, and they wanted to put Jesus in a cell, and we see that there are several here. But they understood that Jesus couldn't be in a regular cell, so they put him in a kind of solitary confinement, which we can see right here. The floor is original, so it's very uneven, so we have to be careful when we walk here. But going up, we see this kind of window, and looking down, we see the solitary cell where Jesus was placed. And we're going to enter it, but for that we have to go around. With every step Jesus took, with every hour that passed, his suffering increased. Imagine what it's like to be here, imprisoned alone during the night. But the greatest suffering wasn't because of the imprisonment itself, but because of what was happening outside. Here outside the prison was Pedro, Jesus' great companion, one of the apostles, so dear to Jesus. 3 different people come up to him and ask, "Do you know him? Are you one of the Galileans, one of Jesus' followers?" And 3 times Pedro denies Jesus. Here it's a suffering that's more than physical. It's also emotional and spiritual suffering. And here is Psalm 88, which reflects the suffering of this place. And I think the most important sentence is this one. My soul is saturated with suffering, and my life has reached the gates of death. Jesus, he spends several hours in here, and we know that while he was in prison, outside the rooster starts to crow. This indicates to us that sunrise has probably arrived. At this time of year, sunrise is around 5:30 in the morning. There is also a second interpretation that says maybe this rooster wasn't the animal, but rather the temple trumpet player, who would blow the trumpets 3 times in the morning as well. But he also did this right at sunrise, at the beginning of the morning. So, when the first rays of sun are coming out at 5:36 in the morning, Jesus was here, and then, when it gets light, he is going to be taken to Pontius Pilate. And here we see an original street, an original staircase, which exactly connects the upper part of the city. And that's why nowadays it is known as the Holy Staircase, because we believe that Jesus walked here during those moments of so much suffering. Imagine the first rays of sunlight starting to rise. Jesus enters here tied up, brought by the soldiers. And where does he enter? In the great fortress of Antonia. If we arrived here 2,000 years ago, we would see a colossal fortress built by King Herod himself. It was next to the Temple of Jerusalem, and there were always Roman soldiers inside waiting for orders from Pontius Pilate. And in this same fortress is where Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, condemns Jesus to death, the most terrible death of that time, death by crucifixion. The buildings we see here are from a later period, but archaeological findings at this site prove without any doubt that we are walking over the remains of that same fortress. And Pontius Pilate, besides condemning Jesus to an extremely painful and agonizing death on the cross, wants to add even more suffering to him. And that's why inside the Antonia fortress, Jesus is scourged. He is whipped, slapped. He receives the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Tradition says that the specific place inside the Antonia fortress where this happened is exactly where this church stands today. We can even see that the church's entrance arch reminds us of the shape of the crown of thorns. So let's enter the place of the flagellation. Here we can really see all the suffering that Jesus went through represented. Among the representations right above me is the crown of thorns. The purpose of putting a crown, even though it was made of thorns, and a purple robe, which was a royal color, was that Pontius Pilate wanted to mock Jesus, to mock the crime he was being accused of. Inri Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Jews. These stones that I am stepping on now, they are original from the Antonia fortress. Crucifixion was a method very commonly used by the Romans. Pontius Pilate, he was famous for crucifying thousands of people. We even know that on that very day, next to Jesus, 2 more people were crucified, 2 thieves. But Pontius Pilate wanted to differentiate Jesus' crucifixion from the others. And that's why, besides the scourging, he gives the cross to Jesus. And Jesus was supposed to carry the cross through the streets of the city. So here's the place where the cross was received and the beginning of the Via Dolorosa. The Via Dolorosa is approximately 1 kilometer long. If the terrain were flat and there were no obstacles, you could walk it in about 15 or 20 minutes. But we know that this was not the reality. Jesus' Via Dolorosa takes a long time because of all the obstacles that were along the way. So, we are going to take this long and difficult journey together now. Now up here we see a large arch. It is known as the Arch of Ikeomo, which is one of the phrases Pontius Pilate says to Jesus and means, "This is the man." And up to this point is where the Antonia fortress reached. So the moment we cross it, we will be walking the path that Jesus walked through the streets of the city. Come with me. The path of the Via Dolorosa is located in what is today the Muslim quarter of the old city of Jerusalem. And you will see that there are shops here, businesses, people passing by, the hustle and bustle of the city. At this time that we're passing through now, there are actually fewer people because we're currently in the month of Ramadan, which is the holy month for Muslims. But we have to understand that Jerusalem was also like this in biblical times. Jesus doesn't walk on a red carpet, a grand path made for him. Instead, Pontius Pilate makes him walk through the city streets, down the avenues, in front of schools, study centers, in front of shops, in the markets, so that as many people as possible would see Jesus' suffering and humiliation. So as we are now walking in Jerusalem with everything happening around us, it's much more authentic than what we often see in movies, which look like a place prepared especially for that. And yes, their goal, once again, was for as many people as possible to see Jesus suffering. We are now arriving at a fork in the Via Dolorosa. It's very important for you to know that there are two places in Jerusalem where the crucifixion and the tomb of Jesus possibly took place. One of them is called the Garden Tomb, and it's in the direction we're heading together now. And the second possibility is called the Holy Sepulchre, and it's in that direction. I'll also leave a video about the Holy Sepulchre linked here for those who want to watch it. But right now, we're heading together to the Garden Tomb. See now how the city started to get busy in just a few minutes. And this really reflects much better how the city looked in the times of Jesus. Also, it's important for us to remember that this whole area here isn't flat. We are going uphill, an ascent from the moment of receiving the cross all the way to Calvary. Jesus will walk this path slowly. First, there is the whole matter of the climb. Second, he will be carrying a very heavy cross. There are several discussions about how much that cross should weigh, but the most widely accepted number among historians is approximately 135 kilos. But what we do know for sure is that the cross was so heavy that Simon of Cyrene helped Jesus carry the cross. There are also traditions that say Jesus falls more than once with the cross. And so slowly, in front of the whole city of Jerusalem, Jesus, along this path, carries his cross. The Bible tells us that Jesus was crucified outside the city walls, and we can see that our path leads toward one of the exit gates. At this moment, we are leaving through the Damascus gate and we are outside the walls of Jerusalem. But these walls that we see, so beautiful and so imposing, were built only 500 years ago by Sultan Süleyman the Magnificent of the Ottoman Turkish Empire. So how can we be sure that we are now outside the walls of Jerusalem, just as in the times of Jesus? For that, we need to look down here. Looking down, we see a smaller gate. This gate is original from the time of Jesus. And that's why we know that the city of Jerusalem didn't go beyond this point in the time of Jesus. And now we continue our walk because we still have more climbs ahead. Another thing that made this journey, this path, more difficult was the ground. 2,000 years ago, the ground wasn't as perfect and paved as we see it today. From the moment we left the Damascus gate, the entire path until reaching Calvary was made of dirt, an uneven ground, which made Jesus' passage even more difficult and made the journey even slower. And we finally arrived at Golgotha, also known as Mount Calvary, or the place of the skull. And the name is probably due to its shape. We can really see that this hill actually resembles a human skull. And it resembled it even more until a few years ago, when unfortunately a big snowstorm knocked down the nose. But looking at old photos, we can really see how this place resembles a human skull. And Jesus arrives here, as the Bible itself tells us, at the 3rd hour. At that time, time was counted in a different way, since midnight, which is what we use nowadays to mark the beginning of the day, didn't make any sense because sunrise and sunset were really used as the markers for the beginning or end of the day. So, the 3rd hour, when Jesus arrives here, is around 9 o'clock in the morning in today's time. And so at 9 in the morning, Jesus was crucified on Mount Calvary. Was death by crucifixion an extremely slow death? In fact, that was one of the reasons it was considered so terrible. It was a prolonged suffering for many, many hours, sometimes even for more than a day. We also remember the passage when Paulo was killed. Paulo, being a Roman citizen, received a quick, less painful death, and for that reason, it was considered more honorable. He was beheaded. So think about how terrible crucifixion was, for beheading to be considered a luxury granted only to Roman citizens. And Jesus really did spend many, many hours on the cross. The Bible also tells us that between the 6th and the 9th hour, there was darkness over the land. And at the 9th hour, which means at 3 in the afternoon, 6 hours after the crucifixion, Jesus cries out in a loud voice and gives up his spirit. All of this happened on a Friday, and Jewish tradition says that Jews must be buried before Shabbat, before sunset on Friday, which is around 6:30 in the evening. But there is a problem. Jesus had not prepared a tomb for himself here. And then Joseph of Arimathea enters the story. He was a very rich man who, next to the place of the crucifixion, had a new tomb carved out of the rock. At the end of the afternoon, Jesus' body is taken down from the cross and prepared according to Jewish tradition. He is anointed, placed in a shroud, and taken to the tomb before sunset. This is around 5:30 or 6 in the evening. In front of me, I can already see the empty tomb, and the entrance to the tomb was closed by a large stone. That stone disappeared over time, but what we see here is an original stone that was brought from another tomb. It was donated here to the Garden Tomb by the Israel Museum, which has the largest collection of antiquities in the whole country. So, as we walk by here, we can see this stone and imagine what the original stone that closed this tomb looked like. As the Bible tells us, the tomb is carved into the rock. There was this first part, which is the part for the living, and here on the side, the space where the bodies were placed, and the specific space where we believe the body of Jesus was laid. It's this one here. The body of Jesus was placed here a little before sunset, and the entrance to the tomb was closed. And thus the last 24 hours of Jesus' life here in Jerusalem come to an end. But the story doesn't end with Jesus being placed in the tomb, but rather with the tomb being empty. So let's go out and talk about the most important part of our story, which is the third day. Today, in our Easter special, we talked a lot about the last 24 hours of Jesus' life. All the suffering, all the scourging, the Via Dolorosa, everything terrible that happened. But of course, when we talk about Easter, the focus isn't on the first 24 hours, but on the third day, the day of the resurrection. And I can sum up everything most important about Easter in a small sign that's right here inside. Come with me. This sign used to be at the entrance of the tomb until a few years ago. But to make the pilgrimage easier, they took it down and put it here. This little phrase says the following: "He is not here because he has risen." And when we talk about Easter, this is the summary of Easter. It's not about focusing on all the suffering that happened, but rather on the happy ending of the story, which is the resurrection. We are here with João Batista Evangelista. He is Brazilian and has been a volunteer here at the Garden Tomb for many years. He is the one who welcomes our Brazilian groups here, as well as all the Brazilians who come to visit this very special place. And now, since it's Easter Sunday, I would like you to tell us a little more about the empty tomb.
Yes, we are here looking at the empty tomb. He has risen and we can believe in tomorrow. The Bible says that Jesus rose on the third day here in Jerusalem, very close to where we are now. The Prince of Peace is alive and reigns throughout the world. May I bless your heart and your family, and I want to wish you a happy Easter of 2024. We hope to see you here in Israel and at the Garden Tomb, visiting the empty tomb, which is the greatest testimony that he has risen and is alive.
I hope you enjoyed our Easter special this year. Happy Easter, João. Thank you once again.
Once again, thank you and happy Easter from here at the Garden Tomb.
Happy Easter to all. Have a blessed Sunday.
Amen.
Kisses and see you next time.